The hook. The silence that followed Vinny's mockery lasted exactly 4 seconds, long enough for the crew's laughter to die, long enough for Arnold's jaw to tighten, long enough for Vinny to notice the shift in the Austrian's eyes, not anger but something colder. Calculation. "Mr. Torino," Arnold said, his accent thick but his English precise. "Perhaps we continue this conversation later, yes?" Vinny had expected rage. He'd gotten ice. The assistant director called places, and Arnold walked back to his mark without another word. Vinny watched him go, that familiar Hollywood high coursing through his veins. He'd just put the muscle-bound immigrant in his place, reminded everyone on set who the real star was. Vincent Torino, 2-time Golden Globe nominee. The man who'd made Street Thunder the highest-grossing action film of 1982. He didn't notice the way cinematographer Dean Semler avoided his eyes, didn't catch producer Raffaella De Laurentiis whispering urgently into her assistant's ear, didn't see the script supervisor quietly packing her gear, suddenly eager to be anywhere else. What Vinny saw was Arnold, shirtless and stoic, hitting his marks with mechanical precision for the rest of the day. The Austrian never looked at him again, not once. That should have been Vinny's first warning. 3 weeks later, back in Los Angeles, Vinny's agent Mickey Rourke, not the actor, the other Mickey Rourke who'd built half the action careers in Hollywood, called him into his Century City office. Mickey was sweating, which was unusual. Mickey never sweated, even when negotiating 8-figure deals in August boardrooms. "Vinny, we got a problem." "What kind of problem?" Mickey slid a manila folder across his glass desk. Inside were photos from the Mexico set. Professional shots, the kind studio photographers took for publicity. But these weren't publicity shots. These were evidence. Frame after frame of Vinny's mockery, captured from multiple angles, his sneering face, the crew's uncomfortable laughter, Arnold's stone-cold reaction. Where did these come from? That's not the right question, Vin. The right question is who's asking about them. Mickey lit a cigarette with shaking hands. 3 studios called this morning. 3, all asking the same thing. Was their golden boy Vincent Torino the kind of actor who humiliated CO stars on set? Was he a team player? Could they trust him with their $100 million investments? Vinny felt something cold crawl up his spine. It was just a joke, Mickey. Crew breaks ballbusters all the time. Not like this. Mickey pulled out another folder. Someone's been making calls, detailed calls, about your unprofessional behavior in Mexico, about how you created a hostile work environment, about how insurance companies might want to think twice before covering your next picture. The words hit Vinny like physical blows. In Hollywood, insurance was everything. No insurance, no movie. No movie, no career. This is insane. Who would... The Austrians got friends, Vinny. Powerful friends. Maria Shriver's family friends, Kennedy friends. The kind of friends who don't just make movies, they make senators. Vinny stared at the photos. In one, Arnold's face was turned slightly toward the camera, and for just a moment, Vinny could swear he saw something in those pale eyes. Not hurt, not embarrassment, strategy. What do they want? Mickey crushed out his cigarette. A public apology. Full page in Variety. You call Arnold a consummate professional, say you were out of line, the whole 9 yards. Absolutely not. Vinny. I said no. Vinny slammed his hand on the desk. I'm not apologizing to some Austrian bodybuilder for making a joke. This is America, Mickey. Since when do we bow down to... Since that bodybuilder's connected to people who can make us disappear. Mickey's voice dropped to a whisper. Vinny, I've been in this town 30 years. I've seen careers end over less, much less. Swallow your pride and write the apology. But Vinny couldn't, wouldn't. He was Vincent Torino. He'd been somebody when Arnold was still posing in tiny shorts and baby oil. The idea of groveling to that immigrant muscle freak made his stomach turn. He walked out of Mickey's office with his head high and his jaw set. In the parking garage, he sat in his Porsche for 10 minutes, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Still handsome, still strong, still the guy who'd beaten Stallone for the lead in Street Thunder. Still a star. That was June 8, 1984. By August 15th, Vinny had lost 3 confirmed roles and 2 that were still in development, but probably going a different direction. By September 20th, Mickey stopped returning his calls. By October 30th, Halloween, how's that for cosmic irony? His publicist dropped him via certified letter. The Austrian had ended his career with 4 words: "Perhaps we continue this later." 30 years later, sitting in his North Hollywood apartment while Maria slept off another round of chemo, Vinny finally understood the truth. He'd never been hunting. He'd always been the prey. And tomorrow, someone was coming to collect. Where are you following along from tonight? Drop a comment below and make sure you're subscribed, because Chapter 2 reveals the mysterious package that changes everything. And trust me, you won't see this twist coming. Hashtag Chapter 2 Introduction. The morning light filtered through the torn blinds of their North Hollywood apartment, like stage lighting through a broken gel, harsh, unforgiving, revealing every crack in the plaster walls and every stain on the second-hand carpet. Vinny sat at their kitchen table, which wasn't really a kitchen table but a card table they'd bought from a garage sale in Reseda 3 years ago, when the medical bills started mounting. The coffee in his chipped mug had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept holding it anyway, needing something to anchor his hands. Maria was still sleeping. The chemo always knocked her flat for days afterward, and yesterday had been treatment day. He could hear her breathing from the bedroom. Shallow, labored, nothing like the deep, contented sighs she used to make when they'd lie in bed on Sunday mornings in their old Malibu house, planning their future like they had one. That house was gone now. Sold 2 years ago to pay for her first round of treatment. The Porsche had followed 6 months later, then the watches, the jewelry, the signed movie posters, the Hollywood memorabilia, everything that proved Vincent Torino had once mattered in this town. Everything except Maria. She was the only good thing left from his old life, the only thing worth protecting. Vinny traced the rim of his coffee mug with one finger, a nervous habit he'd developed somewhere between his 50th and 60th rejection letter. His hands were still strong, still the hands that had thrown punches in a dozen action films, but now they shook slightly when he wasn't paying attention. Age, maybe, or fear. Probably both. The apartment smelled like disinfectant and defeat. Maria tried to mask it with vanilla candles from the dollar store, but underneath the artificial sweetness was the metallic tang of illness and the musty odor of a building where dreams came to die. Their neighbors were all like them, former somebodies reduced to nobodies, clinging to North Hollywood because it was close enough to the industry to pretend they were still part of it. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Chen next door watching her morning soap opera. The volume was cranked up because her hearing was going, and the dramatic music bled through the drywall like a soundtrack to his own slow-motion tragedy. Upstairs, someone was practicing guitar, badly. The same 3 chords over and over again. Another dreamer who hadn't gotten the memo that Hollywood had moved on without them. Vinny stood and walked to the bedroom doorway, careful not to let the floorboards creak. Maria lay on her side, her once thick dark hair now wisps against the pillow. She'd been beautiful when he met her in 1989. 5 years into his exile from Hollywood's A-list. Still beautiful now, even with the cancer eating away at her from the inside. Maybe more beautiful, because now her beauty was fragile, temporary, something that could be taken away. She'd married him when his career was already in free fall, when other women were pretending they didn't know him at industry parties. Maria had never cared about the fame or the money. She'd fallen in love with the man, not the movie star. Sometimes Vinny wondered if that made her saint or fool. Probably both. Her prescription bottles lined the nightstand like plastic soldiers. 10 different medications with names he couldn't pronounce, each one costing more than he used to spend on dinner. The newest bottle, the one with the experimental drug that might buy her another year, was empty. The refill would cost $12,000. Money he didn't have, money he'd never have, not unless something changed. The morning newspaper lay folded on the kitchen counter, delivered by the same kid who'd been throwing it at their door for 3 years. Vinny had stopped reading the entertainment section a decade ago. Too many stories about people who used to return his phone calls, too many photos of events where he was no longer welcome. But today, he flipped to it anyway, driven by the same masochistic impulse that made him Google his own name sometimes at 3 a.m. There was Arnold on page 3. Shaking hands with some tech billionaire at a climate change summit. Older now, grayer, but still commanding attention wherever he went. Still mattering. The caption identified him as former governor and Hollywood icon Arnold Schwarzenegger. No mention of Conan the Destroyer. No mention of Mexico, 1984. No mention of the broken careers he'd left in his wake. Vinny closed the paper and walked to the window. Outside, Los Angeles stretched endlessly under a sky the color of old concrete. Somewhere out there, in mansions in Beverly Hills and Bel Air, the people who'd destroyed his life were eating breakfast, prepared by personal chefs, planning their days around charity galas and red carpet events. They'd probably forgotten he existed. But Vinny remembered everything. Every slight, every closed door, every conversation that stopped when he walked into a room. 30 years of exile had given him plenty of time to memorize the details of his own destruction. Tomorrow someone was coming to collect. He could feel it in his bones, the way old injuries ached before rain. The knock came at 11:47 a.m., sharp and deliberate against their hollow apartment door. 3 raps, pause, 2 more. Not the casual knock of a neighbor or the hurried tap of a delivery driver running behind schedule. This was the knock of someone who knew exactly who they were looking for. Vinny froze at the kitchen table, coffee mug halfway to his lips. In 30 years of exile, nobody knocked on their door except landlords, bill collectors, and medical supply deliveries. Everyone else had forgotten where Vincent Torino lived. Most had forgotten he lived at all. The knock came again. Same rhythm, patient but insistent. Maria stirred in the bedroom, her voice weak and groggy. "Vinny? Someone at the door?" "Go back to sleep, honey. Probably just another medical bill." But his voice caught on the lie. Medical bills didn't knock. They slipped under doors like poison, silent and lethal. Vinny approached the peephole, his bare feet silent on the worn carpet. Through the fisheye lens he saw a kid, couldn't be more than 25, wearing a uniform shirt from some courier service he didn't recognize. The kid held a manila envelope in one hand and an electronic clipboard in the other. Normal enough. Except normal deliveries went to the front office first, and Mrs. Rodriguez would have called up to announce them. Vincent Torino? The voice was young, professional, bored. Vinny's hand hesitated on the deadbolt. Nobody used his full name anymore. On the few casting calls he still attended, he was just Vinny T at the unemployment office. He was Mr. T. Even the doctors treating Maria called him Mr. Vincent. His real name belonged to a different man, one who'd had a career worth destroying. Who's asking? Special delivery. Need a signature. Through the peephole, Vinny watched the kid shift his weight, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Just a messenger. Probably didn't even know what he was delivering or who Vincent Torino used to be. To him, this was just another stop on his route, wedged between apartment 12B and the dental office on Ventura. Vinny opened the door but kept the security chain latched. The kid looked even younger up close, with acne scars on his cheeks and the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone working 3 gigs to pay rent in a city that ate dreamers alive. Probably an actor himself, between auditions that would never amount to anything. "ID?" the kid asked. Vinny showed his driver's license through the crack, and the kid nodded, consulting his clipboard. The envelope in his other hand was thick, expensive-looking. Not the thin, business-sized envelopes that usually brought bad news. This was substantial, heavy. The kind of envelope that once carried movie contracts and 8-figure offers. "Sign here." Vinny undid the chain and accepted the electronic stylus. His signature looked shaky on the small screen, old man's tremor, not the confident scrawl that had once been worth millions. The kid handed over the envelope and disappeared down the hallway without another word, already forgetting this delivery before he reached the elevator. Vinny closed the door and turned the envelope over in his hands. His name and address were typed on a crisp white label, but there was no return address, no corporate logo, no law firm letterhead. The envelope felt substantial, like it contained photographs or documents, or both. "What was it?" Maria called from the bedroom. "Nothing important," he lied again, walking to the kitchen table. But his hands were shaking now, and not from age. He tore open the envelope carefully, as if whatever was inside might explode. Photographs spilled across the card table. Black and white 8x10s, professional quality, the kind studio photographers used for publicity shots. But these weren't publicity photos, these were surveillance shots. Pictures from the set of Conan the Destroyer, Mexico, 1984. Pictures he'd never seen before. There he was at 28, still handsome, still confident, still believing the world owed him something. There was Arnold, shirtless and stoic, hitting his marks with mechanical precision. There was the crew, uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact. And there, in crystal clarity, was the moment that had destroyed everything. Vinny's face twisted in cruel laughter, his mouth open in the middle of his circus fake muscles joke. But these weren't the photos Mickey had shown him 30 years ago. These were different angles, different moments. Someone else had been documenting that day. Someone who'd been watching from the shadows while Vinny destroyed his own life in real time. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper. Expensive stationery, heavy stock, the kind that whispered money and power. The message was typed in a simple, elegant font. Mr. Torino, the truth about what really happened on June 8, 1984, is worth $2 million to the right buyer. If you're interested in learning why your career really ended and who was pulling the strings, meet me at Musso and Frank's tomorrow at 3 p.m. booth 9. Come alone. The past isn't finished with you yet. There was no signature, no name, no explanation of who was offering $2 million for a 30-year-old secret or why they'd chosen now to surface. But as Vinny stared at the photographs scattered across his kitchen table, he realized something that made his blood run cold. In every single shot, Arnold wasn't looking at him with anger or embarrassment. Arnold was looking directly at the camera, as if he'd known all along that someone was watching, as if the whole thing had been performance, as if Vinny had never been the hunter at all. Chapter 4, Early Development. Vinny swept the photographs into a pile and shoved them back into the envelope, his heart hammering against his ribs. $2 million. The number burned in his mind like neon, bright and impossible. $2 million would pay for Maria's treatments, buy them a decent place to live, maybe even get him back on his feet. But nothing in Hollywood came without a price, especially not money that fell from the sky into the lap of a has-been nobody. He walked to the kitchen window and stared down at the courtyard, searching for anything out of place. A car that didn't belong, someone watching. But there was only Mrs. Chen hanging laundry and the teenage son of the family in 4 bouncing a basketball against the garage door. Normal Tuesday morning in North Hollywood. Nothing to suggest his world had just tilted off its axis. Vinny? Maria's voice drifted from the bedroom, stronger now. You're pacing. I can hear the floorboards. He forced himself to stop moving. Sorry, honey, just restless. But restless didn't cover it. Every instinct he'd developed in 30 years of survival in this town was screaming at him to run, to pack what they could carry and disappear into some small town where Vincent Torino was just another old man with a past nobody cared about. Because when Ghosts from 1984 started offering $2 million for secrets, it meant someone very powerful was about to collect a very old debt. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a bomb. He could ignore it, pretend it never came. But Maria's prescription bottle was still empty, and the experimental drug wasn't going to pay for itself. Vinny picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone who might remember him, someone who might know what this was about. The list had gotten shorter every year as old friends changed numbers or simply stopped taking his calls, but there was one name he hadn't tried in 5 years. One person who might still owe him a favor. Danny Kraus answered on the 4th ring. Jesus Christ, Vinny Torino. I thought you were dead. Not yet. Listen, Danny, I need to ask you something. Hold on. There was muffled conversation, the sound of a door closing. Danny's voice dropped to a whisper. Okay, make it fast. I'm between meetings. Danny had been a 3rd-tier agent when Vinny was riding high. Now he ran his own boutique firm in Santa Monica, representing character actors and indie directors. Not A-list, but still connected. Still in the game. You ever hear anything about Conan the Destroyer? The Mexico shoot? Silence. Long enough that Vinny wondered if the call had dropped. Danny, why are you asking about that? Something in Danny's tone made Vinny's skin crawl. Fear. The same tone Mickey had used 30 years ago when the photos first surfaced. Just curious. Ancient history, right? Vinny, listen to me very carefully. That's not ancient history. That's radioactive waste. Nobody talks about Mexico 84, ever. And if you're smart, you'll stop asking about it. What aren't you telling me? I'm telling you to forget whatever you think you know and move on with your life. Some stories don't have happy endings. The line went dead. Vinny stared at his phone, Danny's words echoing in his head. Radioactive waste. In Hollywood, that phrase meant one thing: careers that didn't just end, they evaporated. People who asked the wrong questions about the wrong subjects and found themselves not just unemployed, but unemployable. But Danny's fear told him something else. Whatever had happened in Mexico wasn't just about Arnold's hurt feelings or Mickey's paranoia. It was bigger, much bigger. And 30 years later, it still scared people enough to make veteran agents hang up on old friends. Maria appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her terry cloth robe, moving carefully, but under her own power. Good days were rare now, and Vinny tried to smile like everything was normal. Who was on the phone? Danny Kraus. Remember him? Used to be my agent's assistant back in the day. The nervous one who always spilled coffee? Maria eased into the chair across from him, wincing slightly. What did he want? Just checking in. Another lie. They were piling up now, and Maria was too smart not to notice. She was studying his face with the intensity that had made her a good script supervisor before they met, seeing through his performance to the fear underneath. Vinny, what's wrong? And don't tell me nothing. I've been married to you for 28 years. I know your tells. He looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman who'd stood by him through the exile years, the slow descent from leading man to character actor to desperate nobody begging for one-line roles in student films. She deserved the truth. But the truth might get them both killed. Someone wants to meet with me. About the old days. What old days? Vinny glanced at the envelope, then back at Maria's tired but alert eyes. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., booth 9. Come alone. But he was already alone. He'd been alone for 30 years. The truth sat between them like a third person at the table, uninvited and unwelcome. Maria's eyes never left his face, reading the micro-expressions he'd forgotten she could decode. 28 years of marriage to an actor had taught her to see through every performance except the one that mattered most, the one where he pretended their life wasn't falling apart. Vinny. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades managing chaos on film sets. Show me. He could have lied again, should have lied again. But Maria's hand was reaching across the table, and he saw how the sleeve of her robe hung loose around her wrist. When had she gotten so thin? When had he stopped noticing? The envelope felt heavier as he slid it toward her. It's about Mexico, about what happened on Conan. The thing with Arnold? Maria's fingers traced the envelope's edge, but that was 30 years ago. I know. Vinny watched her face as she processed the implications. Someone thinks it's worth $2 million. Maria's hand stilled. In the silence, he could hear the neighbors, Mrs. Chen's soap opera, the kid upstairs murdering the same guitar chords. Normal sounds from normal lives. Lives that didn't include mysterious envelopes and impossible amounts of money. 2 million, she repeated, and something shifted in her expression. Not greed. Maria had never cared about money. But hope. Desperate, terrifying hope. That's enough for everything. The treatments, the experimental drug, all of it. She opened the envelope with the careful precision of someone who'd once handled original scripts worth millions. The photograph spilled across the table again, black and white ghosts from a life that felt like someone else's memory. Maria picked up the photo of Vinny mid-laugh, his face cruel with the arrogance of youth. God, you were such an asshole. It should have stung, but coming from her it sounded almost fond. She'd never known that version of him, the golden boy who thought the world owed him stardom. By the time they met, he was already broken, already learning humility the hard way. But this isn't about what you said to Arnold. She was studying the photos like she used to study script revisions, looking for continuity errors. These angles, the quality, this wasn't paparazzi or some crew member with a camera. This was professional surveillance. Vinny felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd been so focused on the message, on the impossible offer, that he'd missed what Maria saw immediately. What are you saying? I'm saying someone was watching that day. Really watching. With professional equipment and a specific agenda. She held up a photo of Arnold staring directly at the camera. And he knew it. The implications hit Vinny like a physical blow. If Maria was right, if the whole thing had been orchestrated, then his humiliation hadn't been spontaneous stupidity. It had been planned, orchestrated, which meant someone had needed him to destroy himself that day, and they'd made sure it happened exactly as required. But who would? He stopped, the answer crystallizing like ice in his veins. Mickey, your manager? He was the one who pushed me to take the Conan role, said it would be good for my image, working with someone like Arnold. He was on set that day, managing everything. Vinny's hands clenched into fists. He had the photos within hours. Professional quality, just like these. Maria set down the photograph, her face grave. Vinny, if Mickey was involved in setting you up, he wasn't working alone. Managers don't have that kind of power. They're hired help. Then who? But even as he asked, pieces were falling into place. The speed of his blacklisting, the completeness of it. How every studio, every casting director, every producer had suddenly developed amnesia about Vincent Torino's existence. That didn't happen because of a crude joke about fake muscles. That happened because someone with real power, studio head power, political power, had wanted him erased. The note lay face up beside the photographs. The past isn't finished with you yet. Maria, what if everything I thought I knew about what happened was wrong? What if I wasn't the villain in this story? She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, frailer. Then 30 years ago, someone destroyed our lives for reasons we never understood. And now they're coming back to finish what they started. Outside, a car door slammed. Normal sound, but it made them both flinch. Every noise was suspect now, every shadow potential threat. The apartment that had been their refuge suddenly felt like a trap. Musso and Frank's tomorrow, Vinny said. Booth 9. You can't go alone. The note said, I know what the note said. Maria's eyes flashed with something he hadn't seen in months. Fire, fight. But if someone's been pulling strings for 30 years, if they're powerful enough to destroy careers and rich enough to offer $2 million, then they're dangerous enough to make sure you never leave that restaurant. She was right. They both knew it. But Maria's prescription bottle was still empty, and time was running out faster than money. The past had found them. And this time, Vinny wasn't sure they'd survive the encounter. Chapter 6. Plot twist. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m., its shrill tone cutting through the apartment like a blade. Vinny jerked awake from the half-sleep he'd been drifting in, still dressed, still sitting at the kitchen table with the photographs spread before him like tarot cards predicting disaster. Maria stirred in the bedroom. Vinny? It's okay, he called, reaching for the phone. But it wasn't okay. Nothing about midnight calls was ever okay. Hello? Silence. Then you got the package. The voice was electronically distorted, neither male nor female, young nor old. Pure information stripped of humanity. Who is this? Someone who knows what really happened in Mexico. Someone who knows why you've been living a lie for 30 years. Vinny's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want to give you the truth, Vincent. The truth about who destroyed your life. The truth about who's been pulling the strings since before you even met Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Tomorrow. Musso and Frank's. You'll know me when you see me. The line went dead. Vinny stared at the phone, his heart hammering. The voice had been wrong about one thing. He wouldn't know them when he saw them. After 30 years in Hollywood, he'd learned that the most dangerous people were always the ones you'd never suspect. He was still holding the phone when it rang again. This time the display showed a number he recognized, Mickey's old office line. But Mickey had been dead for 5 years. Yeah? Vinny, Jesus, thank God you're alive. Mickey's voice, clear as day, breathless with panic. Don't go to that meeting. Whatever they're offering, it's not worth it. The phone slipped from Vinny's numb fingers, clattering onto the linoleum. Mickey's voice continued. Tinny and distant, Vinny? Vinny, are you there? Listen to me, you stubby bastard. They're not done with you yet. Vinny scrambled for the phone, his hands shaking. Mickey? How is this? You're dead. I went to your funeral. Mickey's voice was confused now, fading in and out like a bad connection. Vinny, what are you talking about? I'm calling from Cedars. They just brought me in. Someone ran me off Mulholland. The brakes. Static swallowed his words. The line went dead. Vinny stared at the phone's display. Call ended. Duration, 2 minutes, 30 to 7 seconds. A conversation with a dead man that had lasted longer than most of his recent auditions. But as he sat there in the fluorescent glare of the kitchen light, a memory surfaced. Mickey's funeral, 5 years ago. Closed casket. Car accident, they'd said. Went off Mulholland Drive in the rain, burned up before the fire department could reach him. Vinny had stood in the back of the chapel, one of only a dozen mourners for a man who'd once managed half the action stars in Hollywood. Maria appeared in the doorway, moving carefully. Who was on the phone? Nobody, Vinny said automatically, then caught himself. Mickey. Mickey's dead, honey. I know. That's what makes this interesting. Maria studied his face, then walked to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, the way she moved when she was thinking through a problem. Script supervisor mode. Vinny, what year did Mickey die? 2019. March. You came to the funeral with me. No, Maria said quietly. I didn't. The words hit him like ice water. What? I was in chemo. I couldn't travel. You went alone, remember? You came home and said there were only a few people there, mostly industry types paying respects. Maria's voice was gentle but certain. We talked about how sad it was, how Mickey had outlived his relevance. Vinny's world tilted. He did remember now. Maria weak from treatment, him driving alone to the chapel in Burbank, standing in the back, watching people he didn't recognize file past a casket that could have been empty for all they knew. But I remember you being there. Memory's funny thing, Maria said, especially when you're under stress. Sometimes we remember things the way we needed them to be instead of the way they were. But that didn't explain the phone call, didn't explain Mickey's voice, clear and terrified, warning him about a meeting that Mickey couldn't possibly know about. Unless Mickey wasn't dead. Unless everything Vinny thought he knew about the past 5 years was as carefully constructed as everything he thought he knew about Mexico 1984. Maria, he said slowly, what if Mickey faked his death? She was quiet for a long moment. Then the person who destroyed your career 30 years ago just made their first mistake. They got arrogant. They assumed you'd never figure it out. Outside, that same car door slammed again. Same sound, same timing as earlier. Too perfect, too regular. They were being watched. And whoever was watching wanted them to know it. Tomorrow changes everything, Vinny said. Yeah, Maria whispered. It does. Vinny didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, watching the photographs blur in and out of focus as exhaustion played tricks with his eyes. Every time he started to drift off, he'd hear Mickey's voice again. They're not done with you yet. And his heart would kick like a mule. Maria emerged from the bedroom at 7, moving with the careful precision of someone rationing their energy. She dressed in her good jeans and the blue sweater he'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, back when they still had Christmas money. You look nice, he said. I'm coming with you, Maria. Don't. She held up a hand, the gesture still carrying echoes of the authority she'd wielded on film sets. We've been married 28 years. I've watched you carry this weight alone for 3 decades, and look where it's gotten us. Broke, blacklisted, and running out of time. She was right, but that didn't make it easier. Vinny studied his wife's face, the sharp cheekbones made sharper by illness, the eyes that still flashed with intelligence despite everything the cancer had taken from her. She was the only good thing that had come from his exile, the only reason he'd survived the wilderness years. If this goes wrong, then we go down together, like we should have 30 years ago. The morning passed in strange domesticity. They shared coffee and day-old donuts, discussing logistics like they were planning a vacation instead of potentially walking into a trap. Maria called her oncologist's office and rescheduled her afternoon appointment. Vinny shaved carefully, using the good razor, trying to see past the man in the mirror to whoever he'd been before Mexico broke him. At noon, Maria's phone rang. She glanced at the display and frowned. Unknown number, she said, answering. Hello? Vinny watched her face change, color draining until she looked translucent. She handed him the phone without a word. Vincent Torino? The voice was crisp, professional, female. Yeah, this is Dr. Sarah Chen at Cedars-Sinai. I understand you knew Michael Kraus? Mickey's real name. Nobody had called him Michael in 40 years. New? He's dead. Mr. Torino, I'm calling because Mr. Kraus was brought into our emergency department early this morning. He was in a serious car accident on Mulholland Drive. He's been asking for you. The phone slipped in Vinny's sweating palm. That's impossible. Mickey died 5 years ago. Sir, I'm looking at his chart right now. Michael Kraus, 73 years old, admitted this morning with multiple injuries from a vehicle collision. His emergency contact information listed you and your wife. Vinny's vision grayed around the edges. Either he was losing his mind, or someone had been playing a very long game. Neither option offered comfort. Dr. Chen, can you describe him? Sir, I can't discuss patient details over the phone, but if you'd like to visit, he's in intensive care. Family only, but since you're listed as emergency contact, we'll be there. The drive to Cedars felt like swimming through molasses. Traffic moved normally around them, people going about their Tuesday afternoon business, unaware that reality had developed stress fractures. Maria sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, occasionally reaching over to squeeze his hand. What if he's been alive this whole time? She asked as they pulled into the hospital parking garage. Then someone wanted us to think he was dead. Someone with enough power to fake a funeral, enough connections to make it stick. Why? That was the question eating at him. Why fake Mickey's death? Why wait 5 years to resurface? Why offer $2 million for information about Mexico if whoever was behind this already had all the answers? The ICU smelled like disinfectant and despair. Dr. Chen was a small, serious woman who looked like she'd been working 36 hours straight. She led them through corridors lined with monitors and machines that beeped out digital heartbeats. He's been in and out of consciousness, she explained. Head trauma, several broken ribs, internal bleeding. We're monitoring for signs of brain swelling. Room 314 contained a man who looked like Mickey Kraus if Mickey had spent 5 years aging in a cave. Thinner, grayer, hollowed out, but unmistakably alive. Jesus Christ, Vinny whispered. Mickey's eyes opened, focused with effort on Vinny's face. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible through the oxygen mask. Told you not to go to the meeting. Mickey, what the hell happened to you? We thought you were dead. Supposed to be. Mickey's hand moved slightly, gesturing for Vinny to come closer. Had to disappear. They were going to kill me for real. Who? But Mickey's eyes were already closing, consciousness slipping away like water through cupped hands. The monitors continued their electronic symphony, measuring a life that shouldn't have existed. Standing in that hospital room, looking at his supposedly dead manager hooked up to machines, Vinny finally understood. Tomorrow's meeting at Musso and Frank's wasn't about the past. It was about finishing what someone had started 30 years ago. Chapter 8, Climax. Vinny pulled a chair close to Mickey's bedside, the institutional plastic scraping against the linoleum. Maria stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder, a lifeline anchoring him to the present while the past threatened to drag him under. Mickey, he whispered, stay with me. I need to know what happened. Mickey's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. His voice was a rasp through the oxygen mask. Should have told you years ago. Told me what? Mexico wasn't your fault. Mickey's words came in painful fragments. Was never about Arnold, about you. Was about the girl. Vinny's blood turned to ice water. What girl? Producer's daughter, Rosalind Kellerman, 16. Mickey's breathing grew labored. She was on set, watching her father work. You never even noticed her. But Vinny remembered now. A blonde girl in the background of those surveillance photos. A teenager who'd seemed out of place among the crew, always hovering near the craft services table. Mickey, what does she have to do with anything? She killed herself. 3 months after Mexico. Mickey's eyes were clearer now, focused with desperate intensity. Pills. Left a note about what happened to her on set. Maria's grip tightened on Vinny's shoulder. What happened to her? Someone hurt her. Badly. While everyone was watching you humiliate Arnold, Mickey's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Perfect distraction. Whole crew focused on your meltdown while someone was. The room tilted. Vinny gripped the bed rail, understanding crashing over him like a toxic wave. They needed me to cause a scene. You were set up. The whole thing. God help me, I was part of it. Tears leaked from Mickey's eyes. They promised me if I got you wound up enough, got you to blow up at Arnold, they'd make me a studio vice president. All I had to do was create a distraction. Who? Vinny's voice was barely human. Who ordered it? Harold Kellerman, the producer, his own daughter. Mickey's breathing became ragged. He needed someone to blame, someone whose career he could destroy to show he was taking action. You were the sacrifice. Maria moved around the chair, kneeling beside Mickey's bed. Harold Kellerman's been dead for 15 years. Not Harold. Mickey's eyes locked onto hers. His son, Richard. He's been carrying on his father's work, Hollywood's most powerful fixer. When he found out I was getting guilty, getting ready to talk, he faked your death. Vinny finished. Kept me prisoner. 5 years in a private facility. Told everyone I was dead while he used my identity, my contacts. Mickey struggled to sit up, machines beeping in protest. But he made a mistake. Got greedy. Started using my name for things that could be traced back to him. Vinny's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Time to finish this. Musso and Frank's. 1 hour. Come alone or Mickey's real funeral happens tonight. He knows we're here, Maria said, reading over Vinny's shoulder. Mickey grabbed Vinny's wrist with surprising strength. Don't go. He'll kill you. Has to. You're the only one left who can connect him to what happened. I can't run anymore, Mickey. 30 years is enough. Then take this. Mickey's other hand fumbled beneath his pillow, producing a small digital recorder. Everything's on there. Names, dates, what really happened to Rosalind, what her father did to cover it up, what Richard's been doing since. Maria took the recorder, her hands steady despite everything. This could destroy him. Should have destroyed him 30 years ago. Mickey's voice was fading again. I was a coward. Let an innocent girl's death get swept under the rug. Let you take the blame for monsters. Vinny stood, pocketing his phone. The weight of 3 decades was lifting from his shoulders, replaced by something harder and cleaner. Purpose. Where are you going? Maria asked. To finish it. He turned back to Mickey. You said he made a mistake. Getting greedy. What did he do? The photos. The $2 million offer. Mickey managed a weak smile. That's not hush money, Vinny. That's Richard trying to buy back the evidence before it destroys him. Someone else has been pulling strings. Someone who wants him exposed as much as you want the truth. Who? Rosalind's mother. She never believed the suicide note. Spent 30 years gathering evidence. Mickey's eyes were closing again. She's the one who sent you the package. She's been waiting for you to be ready to fight back. Outside, a car door slammed. The same sound they'd been hearing for days. But now Vinny understood. It wasn't surveillance. It was protection. Time to go, he said to Maria. We go together. Vinny looked at his wife, seeing past the illness to the strength that had sustained them both. Together, he agreed. The past was finally ready to meet the present, and this time, Vinny wasn't walking into it alone. The afternoon sun cut through the smog over Hollywood Boulevard, painting everything in that peculiar golden light that made even the grittiest corners of the city look cinematic. Vinny walked slowly down the sidewalk, Maria's arm linked through his, both of them moving with the careful deliberation of people who had finally stopped running from their ghosts. It had been 6 months since Musso and Frank's. 6 months since Margaret Kellerman, Rosalind's mother, had sat across from them in that red leather booth, her 70-year-old hands steady as she laid out 30 years of meticulously gathered evidence. 6 months since Richard Kellerman's empire had crumbled in a single devastating news cycle, taking down 3 studios, a dozen executives, and a network of corruption that had poisoned Hollywood since before Vinny was born. The trial was over now. Richard was facing life without parole. Mickey had testified from a wheelchair, his voice stronger with each word of truth he spoke. And Vinny had finally stood in a courtroom and heard someone else say what he'd known all along. Vincent Torino was innocent. But vindication, they'd learned, was a quieter thing than either of them had expected. You sure about this? Maria asked as they approached the familiar building. The North Hollywood apartment complex looked smaller somehow, shabbier in the daylight. They'd moved out 3 months ago. The settlement money from Kellerman's estate had been substantial enough to buy a modest house in Burbank, closer to the treatment center where Maria was finally receiving the care she needed. The experimental treatment was working. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "I need to see it," Vinny said. "Need to remember where we were when everything changed." They climbed the stairs to the second floor, past the apartment where they'd spent 5 years learning to live with less money, less hope, less of Maria as the cancer tried to take her piece by piece. The new tenants had painted the door blue. A child's bicycle leaned against the railing. "You know what's funny?" Maria said, leaning against the railing where they used to stand on sleepless nights, watching the city breathe below them. "I thought getting the truth back would fix everything, make us young again or something." Vinny nodded. He'd had the same fantasy that vindication would erase the 30 years, restore the career, undo the damage. Instead, he was still 58 years old with gray hair and a face that reminded casting directors of failure. Hollywood had moved on without him decades ago. But something else had changed, something harder to define. "Mr. Torino?" They turned to find a young man in his 20s, Latino, wearing a USC film school t-shirt. He looked nervous but determined. "Sorry to bother you. I'm Luis Moreno. I'm directing a short film about second chances, and I was wondering." He swallowed hard. "Would you consider reading for a part? It's not much, just a few scenes, but it's a good role. A man who's been carrying guilt that wasn't his to carry." Vinny studied the young man's face, seeing the earnest hunger he remembered from his own early days. "You know my story. Everyone knows your story now. But that's not why I want to cast you." Luis shifted his weight. "I saw you testify, on TV, the way you spoke about truth, about what it costs to stay silent when you know something's wrong. That's the character I'm trying to write." Maria squeezed Vinny's arm. "You should read it. It doesn't pay much," Luis added quickly. "Probably less than you're used to." Vinny almost laughed. Less than he was used to. Kid had no idea. "Send me the script," he said instead. "I'll take a look." Luis beamed, handed over a business card, and disappeared down the stairs with the enthusiasm of someone whose dreams were still intact. "Vincent Torino, working actor," Maria said softly. "We'll see." They stood there for another few minutes, watching their old neighborhood go about its business. Kids playing in the courtyard below. A woman hanging laundry. An old man reading a newspaper in Spanish. Life continuing, indifferent to the small dramas that had once seemed world-ending. "I used to think the story was about me," Vinny said finally, "about my career, my reputation, my pain, but it was never about me at all. It was about Rosalind, yeah, and all the other Rosalinds, all the people who got hurt while everyone was looking the other way." The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Soon the smog would thicken, and the city would put on its neon mask, becoming the Hollywood of dreams and legends. But for now, in this golden hour, it was just home. They walked back to their car hand in hand, two survivors of a story that had taken 30 years to reach its true ending. Tomorrow there would be new scripts to read, new treatments to endure, new days to build from the wreckage of the old ones. But tonight, for the first time in 3 decades, Vincent Torino would sleep without the weight of other people's sins pressing down on his chest. The truth, it turned out, really could set you free, even in Hollywood.